in part on continued racism in America.
Take a listen.
There is an inherent feeling among many people in this country that an African American ought not to be president and ought not to be given the same respect as if he were white.
Well, joining us tonight, we have Charles Bierbauer, Dean of the USC School of Journalism, Dr. Lonnie Randolph, President of the state NAACP, and Adam Piper, a local Republican activist, to get initial reaction from them tonight. And Lonnie, we want to begin with you. You've heard what the former president had to say. You know what Joe Wilson had to say. Do you think the comments came in part based on racism in the South?
Well, not South, racism in the South, but racism in America. And if you want to put it in the South, then you can say that we are still a capital of very disrespectful and racist behavior here in South Carolina. There are a number of examples. The things that you mentioned earlier, a number of those incidents had their origin, the rest of the past case being one of them. Right here in South Carolina, there is a comfort level with tolerating verbal abuse and abuse of people, and people feel comfortable doing it. And we've done that throughout history. I think it's worth mentioning that today is the day that the first group of folks left Plymouth, England, 389 years ago today to come to America for religious freedom. And when they got here, we are still today dealing with the inequities that they came here to supposedly abolish, but actually have made it worse in a lot of ways. And people of color have always been the persons who've been victimized most, no matter what area of life you assess it. Healthcare, education, all of those are in large part based on the dual system that we have based on race.
Adam, I know when we were going through the election process, you heard from pundits, you heard from critics, you heard from some people who call themselves experts that America was not ready for a black president. Well, America now has a black president, and after what Joe Wilson has said, and after all of the criticism and the light that is being cast upon South Carolina, is America, in your opinion, ready for a black president?
Frankly, I don't believe any of the opposition to Barack Obama has to do with race. And personally, I believe that President Carter should apologize to Congressman Wilson and to the American people for stalling this debate that much further and preventing us from talking about progress, talking about health care reform, talking about creating jobs, talking about the very things that President Obama wanted to do in his address to Congress last Wednesday. And when you think about it, President Obama said, let's not play games, let's not play partisan politics. But since yesterday's vote, since Jimmy Carter's comments, all we've done is distracted the debate and distracted the conversation that President Obama wants to have. President Obama accepted Congressman Wilson's apology. He said today, through his spokesman, Robert Gibbs, that it has nothing to do with race. In his opinion, let's move on and let's talk about the issues. Let's talk about creating jobs, let's talk about fixing health care, and let's talk about moving America forward.
All right, let's move on to Charles Bierbauer now. What's your take on all of this? You're sitting back in your office watching all this unfold?
As a former journalist.
As a former journalist, it is a legitimate issue. There is, as Dr. Randolph says, there is racism in this country. In this particular instance, it exists where it has to be addressed in three different ways. Was it racism in Joe Wilson's mind? Was it in President Obama's reception of it? And was it in the public perception of it? And those are three different things. I can't put myself in either of those three places. I can only look at it from my perspective. From my perspective, we're dealing with three other things, if you'll allow me, and that is, this was a health care debate. And it's something that this nation needs to address, has been talking about for decades and hasn't resolved. And then racism gets in the way of moving that necessary aspect of helping people in their health needs which is not to dismiss the racist aspect. And the third thing is civility. And we basically had one guy who burst out in 2 words of incivility, and we're still talking about it a week later. I think that's a problem in and of itself. Collectively, we need to move beyond that and address real issues.
We're going to get some more comments in a moment about all of this from our panel, but Congressman Jim Clyburn joined us earlier tonight on our 6 o'clock newscast, and he says that he knows firsthand that racism is alive and well in America because he's an elected official and he's